In 1995, Wizards released Magic's first standalone expansion, called Ice Age. It would be set on a continent ravaged by the Brothers' War and fully engulfed in ice. Next to some actual reprints and functional reprints, it also included quite a few cards that are well known and beloved by Magic players today. Thought to be a fixed version of Ancestral Recall, Brainstorm is now one of the defining cards in basically every format it's legal in. Nature's Lore gets cast in what feels like every Commander game that includes a green deck, and few things make 3 players pack their stuff up at the same time quite as often as Thassa's Oracle plus Demonic Consultation. But today, I want to talk about the cards that made me go like, huh, that's a thing? Why don't more people play this card? So let's dive into the icy past with a very promising card by name. Wings of Estir is a 2-mana enchantment that grants the enchanted creature flying and first strike as well as +1/+0. I looked it up and it seems that Wings of Estir is one of only 4 auras that grant flying and first strike, and it is super underplayed for giving such great offensive keywords. Only 0.4% of Geist of Centraft players put this card into their decks, and honestly I gotta say, you guys are missing out. Shift is a 5-mana 4/2 that says during your upkeep, you may change the color of Shift to any color or combination of colors. This is in fact permanent until you decide to change it to different colors. So in a format like Commander, where you are heavily restricted in the deck building process to only include colors that are in the color identity of your commander, an effect like this can become super powerful, allowing you to cram more colors into your deck than you usually would be able to. This made me think of cards like Marang River Prowler, which first of all can't block and can't be blocked, but you may cast it from your graveyard as long as you control a black or green permanent. Now, usually in a mono blue deck, you would be able to fulfill this condition, but a card like Shift let you do that. Cards like Soul of Ravnica let you draw cards for each color among permanents you control. Or, if we want to take a more realistic, more common scenario, Faber Elder could be a card you play in your banned control deck, but a card like Shift would let it tap for 5 mana instead of 3 mana. So, whenever you need a lot of colors all at the same time, maybe think of Shift. Touch of Vitae is a 3-mana instant in green that reads until end of turn, target creature gains haste, and for 0 as an activated ability, you get to untap this creature, but you only get to do it once. Additionally, it has something we call slow draw, meaning draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Haste is a premium keyword in every color, but green, I feel like, is especially starved for it. Getting to immediately attack with your big beaters or getting to tap your Elvish Archdruid immediately the turn it comes down seems super powerful. Obviously, it's a much worse version of Instill Energy, but haste is so good in these decks that I feel like Touch of Vitae actually slots into some of these more combo-y green decks, or even just decks that try to one-shot someone with a big creature that does need a haste keyword. Next is something like a blue fog. It's Winter's Chill. It's a 1 and X instant. You can only cast a spell during combat before blockers are declared. X cannot be greater than the number of snow lines you control, and the actual effect is choose X target creatures that are attacking. For each of those creatures, its controller may either pay 1 or 2. If the player can't pay for a creature, that creature is destroyed at the end of combat. If the creature pays 1, you prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to that creature and dealt by that creature. And if he pays 2 for a creature, it just acts as it normally would during combat. So you pay X, let's say X is 4. For 4 of his attacking creatures, a player needs to either pay 0, 1, or 2. 0 means the creature is destroyed end of combat, 1 means it deals no damage, it doesn't receive damage, and 2 means it functions normally. The reason this card is a bit lower on my list is that it is very reliant on snow islands, but there's certainly good spots for this card. If you're mono blue, there's no real downside in deck building, at least, to include snow basics. But what makes this so good in Commander especially, I feel like, is that Commander players have a tendency to just tap out in main phase 1, right? You just play your stuff, you attack, and then you pass the turn. It keeps the game moving, and it's not a hyper competitive format, so you're not always trying to hide information from your opponents. But if they tap out in main phase 1, that means they can't pay for a single creature that is attacking you, meaning in blue, you get to destroy up to 5, 6, 7 attacking creatures, which is a super unique effect. As I said, it's a bit hard to slot into multicolored decks, but if you are running fewer colors, or if you're in a snow theme already, I think this card is almost a must include. And it's really weird to me that only 19% of Yorn God of Winter decks play this card. I mean, guys, come on, what are we doing here? I believe Jester's Mask was kind of the poster child of this expansion. It's a 5-mana artifact, and it just tapped. And for 1, tapping and sacking Jester's Mask, target opponent puts the cards from their hand on top of their library, and then you get to search that player's library for as many cards as they put on top of their library, and put the cards you search for into their hand. So you get to give them a completely new hand. Seeing this is only in 0.5% of Zen Triplets decks, where it should actually be pretty good, is already crazy to me. But honestly, I think even if you're not going for a super synergy-driven approach for this card, I think this makes for a pretty good group hug and politics card. This mask allows you to give someone the ability to deal with the biggest problem on the table always. And sometimes someone is so far ahead that you can just give them 7 lands and take away their hand. Another great politics card is Gaze of Pain, a 2-mana black sorcery. It reads, until end of turn, whenever a creature you control attacks and isn't blocked, you may choose to have it deal damage equal to its power to target creature. If you do, it assigns no combat damage this turn. This means you can just team up with someone to deal with problematic board states. You offer them that they do not block a single creature. Remember, it doesn't have a downside for them because they won't receive damage. And in return, you deal with someone else's board state. And only 5.5% of all Massacre Girl known killer decks play this card, which I think is a bit low. Next is a card that has me especially excited. It's Iceberg, an enchantment, mono blue, for 2 and X. This enchantment enters with X ice counters on it. For 3 mana, you get to put an ice counter on this enchantment. And you can remove an ice counter from this enchantment to add a colorless mana to your mana pool. Now, mono blue decks are always start for ramp. Sure, there's colorless mana rocks, but you can only play so many of them before their quality kind of drops off the face of the earth. And this is where Iceberg comes into play. I could really see this shine in a mono blue sea creature deck that wants to play big stuff, or if that is more to your liking, a combo deck that treats this like a Pented Prism type card. What I especially like is just getting this down pretty early in an instant speed deck. And whenever you don't need to play anything at instant speed before you go back to your turn, you just pay, make a deposit onto your Iceberg, and can use that mana later on to cast an Omniscience, for example. When I started playing Modern, a really weird deck was floating around the tournament scene at the time. It was built around Blood Moon, basic Snow Mountains, and the removal spell called Scred. Aptly named Mono Red Scred, the deck was trying to imprison its opponents and draw the game out for as long as possible until they finished you off with some powerful dragons. When I saw Mudslide, it made me think about exactly that strategy. Mudslide is a 3-mana enchantment that reads, creatures without flying don't untap during their controller's untap step. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player may choose any number of tapped creatures without flying they control, and pay 2 for each creature chosen this way. If the player does, they untap those creatures. This really gums up the board a lot. Flying is a good keyword, certainly, but it's not a super common keyword, unless someone is running a strategy that revolves around the keyword. So for 3 mana, you get to slow the game down a lot. And if you are playing a prison deck that is mono red, this card is one of the best options you have alongside Ensnaring Bridge, period. Now, not every mono red deck will want to run this, not even every red deck will want to run this card. But commanders like Kazul, Tyrant of the Cliff, or honestly most dragon decks will want to run this. If you are running a dragon deck, why not include this to slow down everybody else while you are still ramping up to those big scary dragons? If you play Vintage Cube, you probably know Orcish Lumberjack. But if you don't know this little 1-drop, you're missing out. Let's read what it does. For 1 mana, you get a 1/1 Orc, but more importantly, it taps to sacrifice a forest and add 3 mana in any combination of red or green to your mana pool. Now that is pretty scary. For a lot of green commanders, I talked about how good going from 3 mana to 6 mana can be in a game of Commander. But going from 1 to 5 on turn 2, that has to be about the most powerful thing you can do. The fact that this is only in 13% of core vault decks is honestly a crime. And lastly, the card from Ice Age that has me excited the most and that I'm hellbent on finding a home for is Dreams of the Dead. Dreams of the Dead is a 4 mana enchantment that for 2 mana has an activated ability to return target white or black creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature gains cumulative upkeep 2. If the creature would leave the battlefield, instead you exile it. Now cumulative upkeep, in case you don't know, means at the beginning of its controller's upkeep, that player puts an age counter on it and then has to sacrifice it unless they pay its upkeep costs for each age counter on it. This is such a powerful, repeatable reanimation engine in a color that is not supposed to get it. It is crazy to me that only 4% of the Niambi decks play this. I know cumulative upkeep is a bad mechanic and you don't want to pay mana to keep your creatures alive all the time, but honestly, don't. If you think about reanimator decks from standard and other competitive formats, they usually put stuff into play that wins them the game on the spot, or generates so much value on an ETB that it becomes hard for your opponents to keep up. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this somewhat different version of looking at a bunch of cards and showing off the most exciting ones. In the Mox field list I put together, you'll find some honorable mentions. And if you think I left out any of the more underplayed, not as well known cards of Ice Age, feel free to let me know in the comments. Always remember, be kind to yourself and others. Goodbye.